Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to see you again. This is the third part of our three-part Make Your Land Available for Farming webinar series. In the first session, we gave a brief overview and introduction to some hows and whys a person might want to make their land available to a farmer. In the second session, we dove a little bit more in detail into some of the specific methods for making your land available for farming. And in this third session out of the three, we're going to be speaking with a live panel of a few farmers and a few landowners and hearing more from them about their experience with finding each other and working through all the details. So the plan for today is that I'll do some brief welcome and introductions, and then I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and then we have a series of questions that we'll be asking them, and then towards the end we'll definitely open it up for folks Q&A. So if you have specific things that you would like to learn more from people about their experience, we'll definitely make time for that. And so then, just as a reminder, we are recording the session, so if you feel the need to maintain your privacy, you can change your name to whatever you like and leave your video off, and that should keep your privacy if that's something that you want. And then we'll send one last follow-up email tomorrow. Thank you so much to the folks that have already given us feedback in our survey link. If you haven't had a chance to do that yet, take a look back through that email, because that link is there, as well as a wealth of resources and links to the recordings of both the first and second session, just in case you missed them or would like to review. Just as a reminder, this project is part of the Land for Farmers project, which is supported by the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program grant through the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. So that program and that funding makes this webinar series possible. It's hosted by the New England FarmLink Collaborative, which is a partnership of FarmLink programs and farmland access services in New England, which includes Connecticut FarmLink, Land for Good, Maine FarmLink, and Vermont Land Link. We provide a variety of farmland access support services, and we co-manage the New England Farmland Finder website, which lists both farm properties and educational resources. So if you haven't yet had a chance to check out that website or the websites for each of the member organizations, I strongly encourage you to make some time to do that. The members of the collaborative build awareness and connection to support farm seekers, farmers, and landowners of all types throughout New England. And we do this through cross postings of farm opportunities, referrals to specialists, joint educational programming like this webinar series that you're attending, and collaborative outreach. And then, so just as a reminder, or if folks didn't join us for the first and second session, I'm speaking with you today from the unceded, traditional, and current territory of the Abenaki people in what is now known as Cheshire County, New Hampshire. And if you are interested in learning more about the current and traditional people of the land that you live on or the land that you farm, check out the website that's linked there in this slide, native-land.ca, and maybe Maddie would be willing to put that in the chat. So with that, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. If you could just keep your introduction to 2 minutes or less. Tell us your name, introduce yourself in any way you would like, how many seasons you've been farming, if applicable, and where you farm or where you own land. And if you're willing, Vicki, I'd like to invite you to kick us off.
Sure. I'm Vicki Schmidt. I have a 150-acre farm up here in Hebron, Maine, which is near Lewiston, Auburn in the Western Maine Mountains. And I've been here for 22 years. I paid off the farm 3 years ago, and that was a good day. And I have mostly working draft horses. I teach logging and farming with horses, and mostly logging, and had a large draft horse business at one time. And as I've gotten older, I've merged more into gardening and slowed down with the big horses a little bit, but I still do train a lot and travel a lot, fitting harness and things like that. So.
Thank you so much. Zach, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name's Zach Ziegler, and I've been farming since 2016. And I grew up in Norfolk, Massachusetts, and I still currently farm in Norfolk. We lease 2 different plots of land in this town, and 2 years ago, my fiance and I picked up another plot of land in her hometown, which is actually in Rockport, Mass. So we have quite a vast distance between one of our fields, but we make it work because we're seeing family up there all the time anyway. And yeah, so we're up to about 5 acres leased right now. I'd say we grow on about a growing space of 3 acres and provide for a CSA and 3 farmers markets during the season.
Great, thank you so much. How about Daniel? Would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Daniel Grover. I live in southern Vermont, and I've been farming for a little bit over a decade. The majority of the time that I've been farming, I've been working in sheep dairy and cheese making. And I'm actually not farming this season. I've been searching for land in Western Mass and southern Vermont for the past couple of years, and I'm working a carpentry job this season. I have some dairy sheep who are being taken care of by a friend, and so we're continuing the search for land. I also have experience working with draft horses, so I was excited to hear that, Vicky. I've worked with draft horses for about 8 years now, in all kinds of different settings. So that's a part of my future farm vision, as well as doing some haying with horses and milking sheep and making cheese.
That is very awesome. Thanks. And what a cool connection. And I'm a little uncertain. Jen, are you our 4th panelist? We had a Jen on the schedule, and I wasn't sure if it was you.
Probably you might have gotten me under my old name. So I've recently undergone a name change. It even confuses people at my day job. So
Oh, great.
probably I've been working. So I guess I'll lead right into it. I'm a landowner mostly, although I've gotten into egg farming and boarding horses and raising, pasture for them at least. I own 210 acres of land in Metro West, basically Metro West, Massachusetts, still within the 495 belt. And see, I've only been there 4 years. I got the property by way of a divorce, and so mostly lease. So I contacted Land for Good 4 years ago, and I've worked with some fantastic farmers through them. So thank you for that, and I've learned much.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to Maddie to ask the first round of questions, and then for our panelists, you can sort of popcorn in as you feel called. Or Maddie, you can call on people.
Awesome. So we'll start off with Vicky, if you don't just mind telling us why you've chosen to make your land available for farmers in Maine.
Well, actually, it's, as I get older, I have no children, I have no heirs. And so I have a big, huge, beautiful, very fertile, deep, rich soil farm that needs to move on to the next generation. So I've had a big intern program for as long as I've been here, and was actually hoping I have one intern who still may consider it, but unfortunately I find with some of the modern day couples, you have one who's very into farming, and whoever they chose to marry isn't so into farming. And if I could do the farming matchmaker, I think I would find the perfect people. But it's a big piece of property. It's got a lot of buildings. It's it's well kept up, and if you do a little bit every year, it's not hard. But I think a lot of people find it overwhelming. But I personally enjoy it.
Sure. So what have been the benefits and challenges of leasing your land or partnering with some of these farmers?
I see very few with what I call staying power and vision. This farm had been abandoned for 11 years before I bought it. And I mean, I literally drove up the driveway. It had a for sale by owner sign out. I literally drove up the driveway and felt I was home. To this day, I know that feeling. And I just, you know, I walked around as much as I could, and you know, went to the you know, called the number and then toured the land with the people and made an offer. And I just, you know, but it doesn't seem that people or kids or seekers these days have that ability to see the diamond in the rough and say, okay, this is going to be a 20-year project, but I'm up for it. And the minute the going gets tough, you know, I had, because some of the couples, I do have another, I have a 2-bedroom ranch that I've had some couples that were interested in the land. And I'd say, okay, you can live here for a year, work the farm as best you can. And none of them lasted more than 6 months. You know, the minute there was a blizzard warning or something going on, I mean, they just couldn't see how we were going to survive. And it's like, we're going to survive. Trust me, we can live without power for 5 hours. It'll be okay, you know. And but learning to start a generator and that sort of stuff was just and as I've developed the farm, I've made some of those things much easier. Now I have an automatic generator, and I'm transitioning to full solar this year. But it's just that being able to have the vision and being able to stay through it, as well as no formal, very hard for them to formal plan and put the time into formal planning. And when you ask them what is their plan, they're just going to get up in the morning and go to work. They really don't have a plan. So those are some skills I've just found really lacking in a lot of people.
Okay, awesome, thank you. I'm gonna transition to Jen real quick, the other landowner on the call. So why have you chosen to make your land available for farming?
You know, similar reasons. So I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and one thing that has always stuck with me is just watching the farmland go down to development. And I had always said that if I was ever in a position to stop a piece of property from becoming another Toll Brothers, you know, division, I would do that. So, and, you know, lo and behold, 4 years ago, I was in a position where I work in biotech, got some money, and with my then husband bought this 208-acre. It's a historic farm. It's got 3 buildings, 2 barns, and a lot of land. We bought it from a couple who had also, they were a doctor and a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. We were both lawyers, who had also held it with the same vision for 25 years of just keeping it green space, keeping it farm. And we bought it with the intent of keeping it that way. Would I have liked to have done more of the work myself? Sure. However, you know, 6 months after we bought it, I went through a divorce, and you know, to your point, Vicki, it was just a divide and conquer. You know, I have a day job that I had to keep working to keep the mortgage paid. Thankfully, I've paid down half of it, so I'm halfway there after the divorce settlement. But just needed the help, and I wanted to learn more. And somebody in the area pointed me to Land of Good and said, you know, you may be able to find some people willing to lease the land. And I said, well, that's great, because I would love people who could actually get some use of, you know, that was the vision, keeping it in that kind of use. And I couldn't do it myself, given where I was. You know, I have 2 kids too that I have part-time, you know, and so similarly, it's, you know, I have a vision to keep it as a farm, but I cannot do the labor myself right now. So that's how I got here.
Sure, yeah, keeping land as green space is one battle, but then keeping it in active agriculture is a whole nother task. So what are the benefits and challenges that you've seen of leasing your land to a farmer?
You know, it's similarly to Vicki. Like there have been a lot of people who've approached me who didn't have a vision. It sort of seemed like a fly-by-night thing. Like I've had people say, you know, I'd love to try living off the land, which just gives me the heebie-jeebies. It's like, you know, do you know how many centuries of people died being foragers? You know, so it really has been a challenge finding that person with the skills and the knowledge and the vision to really make a good job of it. And I actually, after 4 years of it, think I may have found the one. Like I've had a lot of turnover, people who stayed 6 months to a year. But finally, it was actually somebody from the neighboring town. They went back to ag school during the pandemic. She and her husband are former engineers who always wanted to do this. And they had already started on about an acre got a farmer's market and CSA presence and wanted to expand. So they at least seem to have a vision, an established market, and a vision to technical know-how. So we just signed a 5-year lease. But prior to that, the last 4 years have been exactly what you said, Vicki. Just like I've like leased to 3 or 4 different people at a time because it's a pretty big property and they only want like an acre or two. But it's really been the, after a year or so, they give up or something else comes up, or it's, there's just not that strategic vision trying to make, a long-term solution out of it. It's more been like, oh, I want to try this or I want to try that, but not really sharing my vision of more of a long-term thing.
Sure. So I'll pass it off to some of the farmers now on the call. Why have you chosen to lease land versus buy land? What inspired that decision? Either Zach or Daniel, whoever wants to start it off.
I could start off. I mean, definitely financial is the biggest reason I lease land. I don't come from a family with too much generational wealth. Definitely not hard off, but we don't have a lot of wealth to purchase land, or I didn't grow up with a farm in the family or anything like that. And I actually had been working on a farm all throughout high school and was approached by a local landowner who had put up a USDA tunnel grant. And it was a high tunnel that was full of ryegrass. So I opened that up and it really was like an opportunity opening up. And that's on a historic piece of farmland in my hometown. My father's business is restoration carpentry. So I've always been around historic farms and historic farm homes. So kind of going with what I believe Jen said and seeing farmland turn into developments, I've always that's a big fear of mine as well. And my hometown used to be pretty farm heavy not too long ago. And now I like to call them house farms because it's the most profitable crop you can put on an acre in Massachusetts. So yeah, I think just being surrounded by historical farmland or farm homes growing up, I kind of always was interested in agriculture. And once I found a piece of land that was available, I kind of hit the ground running from there.
Awesome. And have there been any benefits or challenges to leasing land versus purchasing it?
I think the benefits is the learning curve, not coming from a farming family. I definitely haven't done everything right. So we're getting to the point, my fiance and I, where we're looking at purchasing land or finding a more permanent lease opportunity, larger opportunity. So I think having used these couple of acres over the past 6 years, I've got to see a lot of different soil types, a lot of different climates, a lot of different water issues. So I think having the opportunity to lease land and learn how to grow and learn how to work different soils has been definitely an opportunity.
Awesome. And Daniel, you're currently on the search to purchase farmland, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So what inspired that decision versus leasing land?
Yeah. So I would say the primary thing for me is that the type of business that I'm planning to run requires a lot of really specific and really expensive infrastructure. And of course, there are ways of developing that infrastructure on leased land, but traditionally, if you're developing infrastructure on leased land, then you don't actually hold the equity in that infrastructure. And so it just doesn't make sense from the point of view of the business model that I'm trying to build to put financial investment into land that I don't own. So that's the primary reason. I'd also say that I've witnessed a lot of farmers in lease situations who have experienced a lot of land instability as a result, who have had relationships fall through with landowners, who have had, just had to leave their farms in the middle of the season or suddenly. And so I've taken those as cautionary tales, and felt less drawn to those possibilities as a result.
Sure, that totally makes sense. I'm going to pass it up to Rachel for the next question for our panelists.
Thanks, Maddie. So the question I have for each of the four of you is, what advice do you have for those who may be considering a farm lease or some other kind of agreement? And maybe it will help to think back about what are some of the things that you wish you had known when you were first starting to consider entering into some sort of land share agreement. Vicki, would you be willing to start?
Sure. Well, I have 45 acres leased to a hay farmer. He has dairy cattle and was raising it, excuse me, growing a high protein silage and haylage for his cattle, dairy cattle. He had replacement heifers, and he actually, I had that lease for 15 years, and it was a 5-year renewable lease every year until one of us decided, you know, if anything came up, you know, if I did find someone to buy the whole farm, he would still have his 5 years because he was putting, you know, he was growing fantastic high protein hay, which was too high for my horses. Actually, everyone laughs because I lease out my hayland and then go buy hay from the good hay producer down the road. But he did inform me this year would be the last year that he was going to hay it. So, but I have another hay farmer who's more than happy to take on the fields. But I think the 5-year renewable every year for 5 years is important. If someone, like Daniel mentioned, someone's going to add investments to that land, they need to at least have a stable exit plan. And it was easy for me to offer that because I had no intention of doing anything else with the land except hay land, and unless I build an indoor arena or something. I got plenty of land to build that if I wanted to. But and it's finding the right person, and hopefully they will find you as well. And there's also, I bought this farm owner finance. The couple that I bought it from, it was their retirement money, the interest on the loan, and they were happy to owner finance. I wrote up my own purchase and sales agreement, and we went to lawyers. I think we each paid $100 each, and it worked out great. And 19 years later, I got it paid off. So, but that's also an option for people that might want to buy. So.
And Vicki, when you're searching for new farmers, maybe who might be interested in leasing space, have you worked with a FarmLink or Landlink program?
Yeah, and yes, I have, I haven't found any good matches, long-term matches. There are lots of great people, but just like I mentioned before, it's a big piece of land. It's lots of buildings. It has a lot to offer. And it's not a homestead. I find a lot of people they want to be farmers, but they really want to be homesteaders. They're not looking to do farmers market CSAs. They're not looking to grow their business. They're not into special breeds of cattle, pigs, or chickens, or eggs, or whatever. And they're more homesteaders than actual farmers or agricultural producers. And I also found most people, they're looking for coastal Maine or the Portland area. The Western Maine mountains up where I am is a little bit of undiscovered Maine, and I think it's creeping in though. I'm a little bit scared, but hopefully it'll be good too. So,
thanks. How about you, Jen? Do you have advice for other landowners who are considering making some of their property available to a farmer in some way?
Definitely thinking through the exit strategy and what happens, you know, for the next person, the next farmer, you know, keeping in, you know, with that in view that a lot of these arrangements, you know, and I'm really impressed that you've had 15 years, Vicki. Of course, I haven't been on the land that long to see if this is even possible. You know, I hope this Medfield thing works out with the 5-year. But what I've had is, you know, people have used various practices, and I should have paid more attention, but I didn't really know anything to, you know, if somebody uses organic or not organic on some, you know, on a plot or part of the land, right? How is the next person going to feel about leasing that? You know, I've had people lay down plastic, didn't really think through like what happened when they left, and now you've got these rows of plastic sheeting, and, you know, you need to get it up. And you know, right now I own all the infrastructure, I own the equipment, they lease it from me. And again, you know, somebody trashed my tiller trying to tear up, you know, the plot. I should have put in more provisions for remediation of the land, what was going to be done to the land. And then, you know, if you break my stuff, you know, should I be the one doing all the repairs if you've done something out of line with it? because originally I think I might have been too generous. I was like, here, just take it and run with it, having no idea, the kind of things that could actually happen or go wrong as somebody tried to use all this stuff to farm. But, a lot of this is learned by doing. So it's, I've basically taken the attitude, well, that was an experiment. Let's amend the terms next time. And now we know this can happen. How do we address this better in leases going forward?
It sounds like one of the things you're both saying is it's very important to have a very clear and specific agreement, preferably in a written lease, that covers as many.
I would completely agree with that. The problem is, and look, I'm a lawyer. I'm going to be the first person to say, have a written contract, have clear language. For me, though, I don't know the business. So how do I even know what to ask for and paper up? Because, again, being a part of I'm a business lawyer by day. It's thinking through the scenarios that you want to cover. And for me, it's just a landowner wanting to do farming. I didn't know all the things that could go wrong. So what to cover in the contract, right? And there aren't that many ag, in Massachusetts, it's not like there are that many agricultural lawyers. I ended up getting my a general business and real estate colleague of mine to help me, but even they couldn't think all of it through, and they do more commercial lease stuff.
And that could be one strong advantage to working with a FarmLink program or Landlink program, like one of the members of the collaborative, is we have that information. We have access to the people with the expertise. We have, even if you're just starting to think about how you might structure a lease or what you should include in a lease, we even have templates for leases that kind of can guide you through. So if you're a landowner and you're thinking about this and feeling a bit like, I don't even know what I would have to consider or have to ask, that's a really good clue to you that maybe reaching out to a Landlink program is something you might want to consider. So I think Vicki, you wanted to add something. I'm going to jump back over to the farmers after.
Yeah, that the lease is a tough one. I had written agreements that were, and I didn't let people use my tractors and horses and anything motorized. The weed whackers, yes, they wanted to weed whack or mow the lawn, yes, but mostly I had them have their own equipment, and I wouldn't mine were formally written. I didn't involve lawyers, or, I required, or I mean, I never had them show any proof that they had insurance, so they had to have their own insurance, and I had releases for them. But outside of that, I was, the lease thing, the guy that leased my hayfields wonderfully for 15 years, we just had a verbal lease. He was a well-respected farmer when I moved here, and we just talked, and everything always went perfectly. So, and I know I was lucky in that regard too. Yeah.
Thank you. So from Zachary, we'll start with you. The audience today is primarily landowners, people who are interested or potentially interested in making their land available to a farmer. So what, as a farmer, what is really important for you to know, or what advice would you give to folks in this position to make their what they're offering attractive or beneficial?
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know if I mentioned this, I do vegetable farming, and it's pretty small scale. We are on tractor scale, but I think it's different for things like haying, where the visual of it is pretty understood, where it's like, you're gonna hay the field, you'll come in there a few times a year, depending, versus what we're doing with intensive vegetable production. We're working out there almost every day, flipping beds, and we got a lot going on. It's not always the most beautiful if you got piles of compost kicking around and greenhouses everywhere. So I think going into it as the farmer, I would always make sure to be straightforward about what we are going to be doing on the land, because I think a lot of times landowners might have a different picture of what the farm's going to be used for. And I think making sure the landowners and farmers agree on the use is very big. And yeah, I mean, kind of back to equipment, that kind of struck me too. I used to use machinery on our first field that we leased. And then ever after that, when the PTO was broken, and I made sure to never use machinery that wasn't mine. So that was kind of a learning curve. And it's funny, I'm actually looking over my leases right now. I tend to do this every spring. So the biggest thing I always put in is permitted uses and just listing like what we're going to be doing, saying we're going to have row cover out, we're going to have low tunnels, and just making sure that we're on the same wavelength of what's going to be happening on the farm before that comes up.
Thanks. Same question for you, Daniel. What advice or input, what's important?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Zachary's saying about, making sure that expectations in both directions are clear about what's going to be happening on the land. I don't have a ton of experience leasing land, but I've thought about it a lot. And I would say that one of the best things that you could do is get support from an organization like Land for Good that has the competency in understanding what agriculture looks like and has the experience in drafting these leases. And I agree with Vicky that a rolling lease, a 5-year rolling lease, is a really useful tool, or a 3-year or whatever it is, because at the very minimum that provides both parties, a buffer of time to adjust and transition out if something needs to change. So.
Great, thank you for that. Jay, this is a bit of a surprise. It wasn't planned. Jay is an employee with Land for Good and also leases land for haying. So do you have any advice that you would give to landowners specifically?
Yeah, I really appreciate everything that's been said so far. And, I think clarifying those expectations and trying to get even just brainstorm lists written down is something that can just be really helpful. I've certainly been in situations where I can spend a lot of time talking with a landowner, but, about values and goals and that sort of stuff, which is really important, but then could still have a mismatch on, I've even had a time where I thought we communicated really clearly, but it was a small field and it was a verbal agreement, and they didn't know I was coming back for a second cutting and started cutting it with their lawnmower. So just these little things where making sure you're on the same page with the farmer, understand what their practices look like. If they're currently farming somewhere, maybe even visiting and seeing what their current farm looks like and what their practices look like, or, even if they're working somewhere. I think trying to just demystify it as much as possible is really helpful. And, again, being with Land for Good, we're always trying to champion the written lease wherever it makes sense. But that's always a calculus both for the farmer and the landowner and how much potential risk there is in the situation. So.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you to the rest of you. Maddie, I'll send it back your way.
Awesome. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We've got a couple more questions for our panelists, but after that, we'll turn it over to you guys. So the last question I have is, how can farmland access or FarmLink programs be more helpful or more supportive for you all? So I'll start with Vicky, and then we'll just go around like we have been.
I don't know how you do it, but a little bit of a better screening process. How and there again, I don't know how it would be. Just the programs I've been involved with, you read what they wrote, and I've learned to be able to tell a little bit more how calculating and how serious and how steadfast some of the people will be. But I don't know how I don't know how you can ask for financials and ask for plans, written plans, and there again, I've had very little in written plans for anything I've done, only when I've had to do them for USDA or some of the other programs that I've been involved with, because especially with horses, so much has been, there's been a lot of variety and a lot of changes that I could have never planned that I took advantage of that ended up being very good. I don't know. I just know that lots of times when I go on to read about perspective, people looking to buy land, I'm just thinking, oh, this isn't the place for them. They would never, I still have questions, but, from what they wrote, I could, it's kind of, I'm not going to waste my time asking, and they might have been good people, but no way to get better information on what their concrete goals are. I guess the goals maybe is the key word. what are the, you know, what are their goals and what are they going to, how flexible are they within those goals? And a lot of it is funding and financing, and do they have savings? And I had one couple come, beautiful, you know, I think they had a lot of good ideas, but they had no money for a down payment, but they had more money in tattoos than I can imagine, you know, and they, you know, it's just what have they chosen to spend their money on the last 20 years, which is why they don't have a down payment, you know, and you know, and I'm a big risk analysis person, and you know, it's who as landowners, who are we going to take our risk on? Who are we going to put that time and effort into? And I just have a goodwill now. That's all. You know? So it's like, and you know, I'd hope to find somebody for it before I pass on, but if not, you know. So.
Awesome.
Have
Thank you, Jen.
Sorry, Vicki, have you ever considered donating it? I don't know if it's historical enough, but my farm's historical enough that if
yes
I don't,
and no, I did.
Yeah.
You know, my theory is I do donate a lot. I volunteer a lot, but when it comes to farmland, I really want farmland to be profitable. I don't think it the nonprofit farms I find are false economies for the, you know, I don't find them viable for the future. I think farmland needs to be productive, and it needs to be for profit, if even only a 3 or 4% profit a year if we're lucky. No, I've looked at some of the donation programs, but nothing's been a fit, because I really want it to stay a working, profitable farm. You know,
I hear you. I still don't know what I'm going to do with it. Like, I still have 2 daughters that may or may not want to take it, but you know, it is something I think about. I'm not getting any younger. But right now it goes to them in trust. But yeah, I don't know. Like, when they're older, what'll happen? I don't know. Well,
one of my interns is going to have to tell a husband, we're moving to Hebron, Maine, whether you like it or not. Should I die prematurely? So.
Jen, are there any other programs that you think the FarmLink programs could offer to be more supportive or helpful for landowners?
Yeah, so, and maybe I didn't take advantage of all of them. I think I've mostly just used the database, and then I looked at the one contract template but changed it substantially. You know, definitely, like I said, part of me just not knowing all the risks was not having time to think it through, but even a dummy's guide, like things to think through that you might, you know, as I'm saying, you know, Vicki, it seems like you have a better head for, you know, what could go on. I mean, there were things that happened on, you know, I didn't think that, you know, I didn't realize, for example, that if they put some kind of chemical for an organic farmer, it's like 3 years until, but even like a short, I don't know if you guys have like a short guide on sort of what are the big issues that could come up, you know, and thinking through what, you know, somebody should be asking somebody, let's say. I mean, the funding thing, completely agree with you, Vicki. I'm of the impression that most people looking to lease, it's really because they don't have the money to buy. And I'm not surprised, given where they, you know, where they've been up to this point, which is, you know, again, the people I found now, right, they're sort of like me. It's sort of a second act after having made money doing something else, but neither of us necessarily knows a lot. They've at least gone to school for it, and they're quick studies, right, and they have 2 years of established, you know, success. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you have a sense of like things that are frequently argued over. I mean, one big war I got into over like who pays for gas, right? And now I just say my provisions, you know, you can use my tractor. I take it as depreciation because I've got a rental business, but I have a can of gas, you have a can of gas. I'm not filling it up. I don't know. Just, yeah, weird things. I don't know.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think that each of our programs has different lists of resources, and there's definitely more that we can put out there, especially I think for non-farming landowners. There's more of a learning curve with what even is going on, and filling in that
like
background info.
I could have used for dummies, and you know, maybe I could help write that at this point, having lived it, but
awesome, yeah. So Zachary, is there any other resources that the FarmLink programs could have offered to be more supportive or helpful for you in your leasing processes?
I've found all the resources extremely supportive. The templates have been really big for me, provided by Land for Good, because I had no idea where to start. I started with a handshake agreement, and we did that for about 2, maybe 3 years. And then once I started seeing some money coming in, I realized, oh, maybe I should try and make this a little more serious. So yeah, I mean, I've found that all the resources provided, I've mainly used Land for Good. I haven't, I check New England Farmland Finder all the time anyway, but yeah, so other than that, I mean, what I find interesting is the land that's out there that isn't connected. You know, there's definitely landowners who might not even have a computer or know about these organizations. So I'm always interested about that and how to connect more landowners to organizations like this.
Definitely, that's something we're all collectively working on as well. Daniel, are there any other resources as a farmer that's looking to purchase farmland that these FarmLink programs could be offering?
You know, I think the reality of most farmland transfers is they don't happen through the real estate market. They happen through connection and community. And so I know that that's a role that a lot of these organizations play, is, you know, connecting directly with farmers and making one-on-one matches. And it just seems to me like that is absolutely the best way that we can match landowners with farmers. I also just wanted to mention the work of the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. You know, the reality of our region, especially, but our entire country, is that we have a lot of white landowners and white farmers, and that's due to historical oppression. And if you have land, consider the possibility of giving it away. You know, figure out a reparations situation and give it away.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of the panelists. We want to open up the floor for questions, and there are a couple of ways that you can ask. I do see that there are 2 in the chat that I'll grab in just a second. So if you're new to Zoom, down at the bottom are some, if you hover your mouse down at the bottom, there's a thing that says reactions. And if you click on that, you should be able to raise your hand. And it looks like that when you do it. If you want to speak verbally, that's what you would do. And then otherwise you can put your question in the chat. So there's 2, and I'll ask the first one, and anyone that has feedback on this, whether it's Maddie or Jay or one of the panelists, or even a participant, feel free to chime in. So the question is, I've seen landowners and farmers start out feeling good about each other around general possibilities, but then can feel some frustration and mixed feelings about each other as they negotiate exact arrangements, just like the feelings there can be between employee and employer once the job offer is made. Usually the relationship rebounds once farming begins, but there is a valley the relationship can go through during negotiations around specifics. Do others see that valley? Any advice on getting through it? And also telling when the issues in the lease negotiations are red flags.
I can speak. I don't feel I have a ton to offer on this. I don't have any problem asking questions if I'm confused about something or would like to know something. I'm not shy in that regard. And I also know people have bad days, people have bad times. We don't always know what's bothering them from the outside world. So if, you know, some of my interns or whoever were a little bit snarky or distant that day, I would just let it roll off my back, because I know I have days too when I'm involved with the fire department. We had one of our students commit suicide, had nothing to do with us, but still, I mean, for about a week I was dazed, just thinking about that and not really engaging with people around the farm. But, you know, so, you know, when you talk about valleys, you know, I consider everything as an evolution, and I don't the personal side of things is important, but the farming side of the things was what always mattered first. And as long as the animals were cared and, well cared for, watered, taken care of, and the vegetables were growing, and, doors were closed at night and things like that. All those little interpersonal things to me never mattered as much as is the whole farm, as the pharmacology and the system working. And we get up the next morning and we're all friends. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, but and I don't even know if that answered the question, but the whole valley, sometimes I think that's just the evolutionary, that's just the part of the process. And, you don't have mountains if you don't have valleys, so it's all good and bad, and it all works out to, in the end, I think.
Thanks for that. Anyone else want to chime in on that question?
I echo, I think what you're saying, Vicki, is you really just don't take anything too personally, right?
Exactly.
I'm in the same way. Like,
Yeah.
the first year or so I was here, I was in a very raw emotional state, and I definitely made some decisions on people, based more on emotions than on, right, seeing it more, not just as a business, but more rationally. And so for me, it really has been more evolving to look, you never know what anybody else's day is, as long as people are following rules and trying their best to work together within, I do set rules and expectations now. For me, red flags are people who are just constant boundary pushers. I say one thing and they just keep pushing and pushing. That person's going to be a problem on the farm. They're going to run over other people. I'm really looking for people who can work together and be team players. It's okay to question rules and suggest things to do better, but not the people who do and ask forgiveness later. I really have a problem with that. And so really looking for people who have more of a team partnership mindset and don't take things too personally, aren't, very, I guess, selfish is what I'm saying. I don't think it's a selfish pursuit, farming. It's, it does take a team to run one of these things.
Thank you. So someone asked a question in the chat. There's often a power dynamic between a farmer and farmland owner, where landowners have more power in the relationship. And so that can create a role or an arrangement that isn't as favorable for farmers and can make it hard for them to invest in their business. How do you think this can be managed to create more equitable, secure, and successful tenure arrangements?
Well, what does power mean? Financial power? The ability to kick you off? I mean, let's talk that. Well, what do you mean by the power disparity?
It's a good question.
I think that's more subconscious energy that someone's tapping into, maybe a fear of their inability to succeed. And so they're, when someone's been farming land successfully for over a decade, and a new farmer coming in, I think there's going to be an inherent intimidation that a new grower or a new owner might see as a power dynamic. But I think there's just as much. I wouldn't. And I don't know, I can't speak for this question, the person making the question, but I think I would seriously consider, is this a real true power dynamic, or am I just feeling a little insecure and need to know that I've got a lot to learn, and I'm trying to be as good as the former owner or former leasee or whatever. I wonder if it's more that than a true power dynamic. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but.
Well, right. I guess what I'm getting at is, are they talking, is this person talking financially? I mean, in which case, like, look, I'd be open to profit sharing or venture, but I've never found anybody who had enough money to be able to do that. And the reality is I pay the taxes, carry a lot of insurance. I'm the one funding the infrastructure and equipment. So I do financially have more power. I'm not saying I wouldn't be open to sharing that, but I haven't found anybody who could do that yet. It's so by necessary, it's like, well, look, I do own all the stuff, but I can lease it to you because, like, what I need you, what I'd like you to do is be able to use this. But in the end, I've got the money to maintain everything, and
I agree. That
what can I really do about that?
Need more explanation in that question.
And Jay, I saw you had unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one example that comes up for me, but also want to make plenty of space for Daniel or Zach. That. I think one point this comes up sometimes is the idea of going from a handshake lease to actually having something in writing. And, there've been times both in my own farming and working with other folks where something starts in a handshake. And then, the farmer realizes like, hey, this acreage is an important piece of my production, like whether it be even just for grant eligibility or just planning horizon, really want to get something in writing. And there's times where certain landowners are really hesitant to do that. And it's this feeling of, oh, we're getting along well. Why not just continue the arrangement the way we have it on a handshake? And sort of the unspoken and, unintentional thing in that is that at the end of the day, that landowner has all the power to end the arrangement at a moment's notice. And
No, I hear what you're saying. And it's funny, it's not only farming where that happens. Believe it or not, I'm at a large biotech and people start doing science before they get all the paperwork. And then that's called doing it at risk, right? Whenever you're going without a written arrangement, you're going at risk. The farmer has put in all this time and money, but you got nothing in writing, and yet the law is in the favor of the law. Yeah. So yeah, well, that's why I go back to my prior statement, always get it in writing. My view would be always get it in writing and do nothing until the lease is signed. Full stop. But I have strong opinions on that.
So I do want to make sure we get to other folks' questions. Linda, I saw you had your hand up. Did you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I have a question about, I haven't been in this situation yet, but it's looking I may be soon. I have the farm. I'm looking for someone to take it over. I bought it to put it with the land trust, and now I'm trying to find someone to buy it from me ideally, or at least lease to own. How does one go about asking and or checking prospective farmers' credit and ability to finance whatever business plan they're presenting? Is it a fair question to say, I need to see your financials? Or is that very off-putting to the farmer?
Well,
I did it this time after not having did it, and it wasn't off-putting to them. It might be off-putting to other sorts of people, but for the people I ended up signing with, it absolutely wasn't a problem.
I'd love to hear from Zach or Daniel how you feel about that, and then maybe Jay and Maddie, since you're both representing Landlink programs, if you could kind of weigh in on what we advise people in that situation. But Zach or Daniel, do one of you have some thoughts?
I would just say that I don't think that's off-putting at all. I mean, it's an at-risk venture for both parties. You want to make sure that the person you're going to be leasing to is going to be able to do what they're saying. And especially where I'm at this point, I think I was given a chance early on to start and didn't have any financial things to show at that point. But being at year 6 now and having business plans and having finances on the books to show, and I think being able to show those things shows that the leaser or the potential buyer is serious about it. So I would say that's an important part of it.
I'll just add quickly. I think that if you are looking at a purchase situation or a lease to buy situation, it's not inappropriate to ask for that information. I think that that's totally reasonable. If someone's going to rent an apartment from you, you're going to ask for a credit check. So I think that is in line.
Lisa, you had a question?
It's not really a question. It's just something I'll put out there. And if anyone wants to comment on it, add to it or whatever. So our farm, I know Zach. Hi, Zach. He's been to the farm. It's not been farmed in a couple decades. I've also talked with Jay about this, and it's 128 acres and it's in Bellingham. And it's, we consider it our baby, but we can't take care of it because we all have different occupations. I'm a marine biologist. I can't be doing farming. I'd love to, but it's not going to work. So we're going to give the land to two land trusts, one that will look after the CR and another one that will lease the farm component. So I would just like to put it out there to farmers that there's this kind of option as well. And it comes with a house. The old farmhouse is there. We just put a lot of money into it to make sure that it's up to snuff. And we really want to have a farmer back on the property because my family's always farmed it until my grandfather died. And I think this is another way forward to continue farming on the land with the portions that can't be farmed under a CR for wildlife and habitat protection. So if anyone's interested.
And CR is conservation restriction, is that
Oh,
right?
yes, sorry. Yep.
Great. We're coming up on the end of our session. Does anyone have any quick suggestions on what we could do to connect more realtors to programs like Land for Good and other land links? Jay or Maddie?
I mean, I get calls from realtors all the time that are asking about listings or that list on the Connecticut FarmLink themselves. I think that realtors that are working on agricultural lands usually know about the FarmLink programs. I'm not exactly sure what we can do to better connect them, but I know that there are a lot of realtors that aren't connected with the FarmLink program. So definitely there's work to be done there. Jay, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, you know, that's something we're always trying to experiment on and or, you know, innovate on. And yeah, you know, I also just wanted to make sure there's enough time in case any of the panelists had a final thought, you know, Daniel or Zach too, just, you know, just because this is a really important conversation to be having with landowners. And, you know, one piece of feedback we get a lot is this idea of a lot of inquiries coming from folks that don't necessarily have the experience or, you know, have a demonstratable business concept. And, you know, this idea of having both Zach and Daniel on this call, being that they're somebody that really have a lot of experience, have done a lot of business planning and really, you know, are eager to continue or to hit the ground running, and just making sure people can kind of hear that messaging too.
Daniel, I noticed you unmuted.
No, that was an accident. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. So if you think you can do it in the next 1 minute, both Pat and Linda have their hand raised. So if we could just hear briefly from them. And then I just, in terms of connecting other realtors to Landlink programs, you all are quite connected in your community. So you can help us with outreach, tell as many people as you can about our program, our collaborative, and what we're doing and why it's important for landowners and realtors to consider innovative relationships for getting more farmers on land. Because we are rapidly losing farmland and everybody needs to eat. So Pat, can we just hear quickly from you, and then Linda, and then if folks have unanswered questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, hi. I was so glad to hear what Daniel said, and I'll be really quick. You know, Maine is becoming more diversified. I think most of us are staying in the Portland area. I'm a nurse, came here as a travel nurse and stayed. But I'm so happy to hear what Daniel said. There are many new, what you guys call the new Mainers who come into Maine, and you know, they're farmers in their country. I'm from Jamaica, and sometimes, of course, they don't have, you know, they don't have the resources. So I do want to jump on and piggyback on what Daniel says, that if there's any, you know, if like that wonderful lady says she gives her land to the land trust, Maine Trust. I'm just new on this thing, just follow it. Because I think I'm a farmer, but I'm not really. And I just encourage people to think about that, because, you know, there are many people who would love to have half an acre just to, there are farmers in their country, but just don't have the ability to do it here. So that's all I have to say. And I really am happy about what the Maine Land Trust is doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Linda.
Both Vicki and Jen mentioned having an exit plan if you're going to be leasing. I know when you lease an apartment or a house, you put a deposit down. I'm thinking, I have, a livestock type of property, and I'm thinking, what if the renter leaves a mess? How do you cover yourself for the cleanup of that financially?
I didn't in the past and regretted it. And now I do ask for, I mean, it's, I'm talking for something that was about $2,000 worth of remediation. I would take a security deposit, now going forward. But in the past, I didn't and got stuck. So it's not a bad thought, Linda.
I think, Linda, if you're new to this, you would be well advised to find, like with the land groups, find somebody that can help you and represent you in that regard. I've had some minor messes left, but mostly I was just happy to see the people go. Cleaning up the mess was minor compared to, people leave their animals. I mean, the animals here are always well taken care of. That always comes first. And if somebody else doesn't do it, then I do. And I have been lucky not having that serious of a problem. But I think, I'm pretty well knowledged. I have a good idea of what it takes and what's needed. And, being on the fire department, the police and law enforcement, everybody's, I'm pretty good friends with that whole circle. So I didn't have any issues. But Linda, I think if you have questions and need guidance, I definitely reach out to some of these organizations and help them screen people for you and make sure it's a good opportunity for both parties and think that positive. I've always think and hope that things are going to work out, and they always have in the end, so.
Thank you so much for that. And I'd echo that, Vicki, if you're considering entering into some kind of relationship with a farmer and you're new to it or you have questions, do work with a land link. I think you would find that helpful. So thank you everybody for being here today. If you find that you're leaving still with some unanswered questions, or if there's more you'd like to know, reach out to any one of us. We'd be happy to help you. If you haven't yet had a chance to fill out our survey that we sent out in the email, I did put that link in the chat. We'd love to hear from you how this session went and how we could improve next year's webinar series based on this year. So thanks so much for attending, folks. We really appreciate it. Thanks to our panelists, and let us know if you have any questions.
Thanks so much, everyone, for having us.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining.